Welcome back to Good Law, Bad Law. We're continuing our focus on the issue of cybersecurity. On this episode, my guest, Jim Turner, who's president of Hilltop Consultants, is a cybersecurity expert. And I know you're going to feel as nervous hearing some of the things that Jim has to tell us as I felt hearing them. All the ways in which our personal information and the personal information of everybody connected to us on the internet through email, through our website traffics, through our online shopping may all be exposed and vulnerable to hacking. Cybersecurity is a huge issue. It is affecting big businesses, as we heard last week, involving the Marriott hotel chain and Equifax, but it's also affecting cities like the city of Baltimore and Atlanta, and businesses, hospitals, healthcare companies, and even law firms like mine face these risks, and of course individuals too. You're going to hear not only the scope of the problem, the ways in which hackers criminally are hacking into private data, and some of the things that people and companies can do to better protect themselves. This is a really important issue, a very important episode. Stay tuned. I know you'll enjoy. Thanks. On this episode of Good Law, Bad Law, we are continuing to explore the issue of our personal data and privacy and the many ways, unfortunately, the very many ways that information can be compromised. And to help us understand the many ways, the many frightening ways that our personal data can be compromised is my guest today, Jim Turner, who is the president of Hilltop Consultants, an internet and computer security expert. Jim, thank you so much for being on the program.
Well, thanks for having me.
Jim is also, I want in full disclosure to note, he is the internet and computer server consultant to our law firm. And tell us a little bit about your background, Jim, and what you do and what kinds of companies and businesses you help with this issue.
Sure. So Hilltop Consultants is what we call a managed services provider. And we have a particular focus on the legal vertical. We're supporting around 400 law firms between Philadelphia, the Washington, D.C. metro area, and Atlanta. And law firms outsource their IT to us, and one of the key areas where we're helping with law firms is with their security. And whether that's us helping them maintain best practices or conducting assessments or providing more advanced security services, because as some people say, law firms are the soft underbelly of corporate America. Where else can I go to find the information on hundreds of businesses through one hack? Where else but go to a law firm?
Right. And I'll tell you how this started to become something I was conscious of. I have an annual sit down with our insurance folks, the people that help us with our workers' comp insurance, our commercial insurance, all the varying insurances that any business needs to have, including a law firm. And I was sitting down with them a couple of years ago, reviewing our policies, and of course, having them tell me how much our rates were going to be going up in the coming year. And at the end of the conversation, I was asked, do we have cyber insurance? And I said, well, what's that? And who needs that? And what are you talking about? And I was told a story that scared the bejesus out of me, which involved a ransomware attack on a law firm in the Philadelphia area. And we're going to talk about ransomware as one of the ways that cyber criminals can attack businesses, including law firms, to get at their data. And I'll tell you, the story of what happened to this law firm frightened me enough that we immediately got into gear and had an evaluation done of our systems to see how we were vulnerable to these types of attacks. So tell us a little bit about ransomware. We'll start with that because that's where I started, in my journey to understand this. Let's start with ransomware, and then we'll get into some of the other types of attacks that not only law firms, but individuals and other types of small businesses need to become much more familiar with and need to take much more aggressive steps to protect themselves and their customers and their clients.
Right, and I think it's important to note that all businesses, no matter what their size, are at risk to ransomware, to malware, however you want to refer to it, because so much of it, while there are some targeted attacks, often you're simply caught up in an exploit that somebody else has fallen victim to. And it may just be that your email address just happened to be in the address book of somebody else who got hacked. There was a version of ransomware out there named Popcorn, where the way to get your data back was to send the infected payload to some of your friends. And if they got infected, you could get your data back. Wow. I don't know if I would exactly trust that strategy with these criminals who infected. I don't know that they would actually honor that commitment, but that was the pitch. So what the typical ransomware infection looks like is someone will open up either an email attachment or click on a link within an email, and they will allow malicious code onto their computer. In a matter of seconds after either opening the attachment or clicking the link, they'll get a notice on their screen that your hard drive has been encrypted. And this isn't just some cryptic message on there that looks like your computer is broken. It's a professional screen, as though a professional computer programmer built this tool, and you might look at it and wonder, why, well, I didn't ask for that to happen. Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing?
Yeah.
It's a very bad thing, because what they're doing, they're encrypting your data, and then they're instructing you to pay a ransom to get your data decrypted.
Literally pay a ransom, as if somebody was kidnapped, but in this case it's not somebody. It's all of the somebodies that have anything to do with your business.
Sure, it's your data, it's your programs, and in some cases the ransomware is affecting the operating system itself, so it might need to be wiped, the computer might need to be wiped and reloaded. And the way that you pay the ransom is through some form of untraceable ransom payment, and that might be bitcoins over the internet. And really, how many people know how to get bitcoins? Very few.
Yeah.
You can do it, but
I've heard of it, but I still don't understand really what that is. But yeah.
So sometimes for the people that have to pay the ransom because they didn't have a good backup and disaster recovery strategy to recover the system after such an attack, they're scrambling to figure out how to get bitcoins. And sometimes it's that they're asking for gift cards, that you enter the numbers of a Walgreens gift card or an Amazon gift card. They're going to ask for something, some payment that you can give them that can't be traced to them once they receive it. So we've seen various methods of payment requested. Now, generally, we like to say don't negotiate with terrorists and don't pay the ransom. But there have been some businesses, some organizations that have had no choice but to pay the ransom because they didn't have the adequate systems in place to restore their data to a point before the ransomware infection. So they take a look at the cost of trying to rebuild their systems and piece together whatever data they had versus the downtime that they're going to incur because of the ransomware. And sometimes it does make sense that they'll pay less by paying the ransom. You know, if you were a transit system and you could no longer accept fares, and let's say it was going to happen for a week, how much money would your city lose over the course of that week? Would it be cheaper to pay the ransom? Again, I don't recommend it, but I can accept something without agreeing with it, and I can understand why people have done this in the past.
Has that actually happened to a city transit system? Is that where you're getting that example?
Yes, there have been transit systems that could not collect fares. There have been police and court systems that lost the camera information from the cameras that police officers wear. So evidence in cases has been encrypted. There have been cities that have been unable to accept payments for various services that they provide. And that's just on the municipal side.
Right. Didn't that happen recently in the city of Baltimore?
I don't know that Baltimore is completely through that yet. I think it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
I know that the ransom demand kept on changing and they were taking the stance that they weren't paying, but I don't know what the current resolution of the issue is. Very often you don't hear the true resolution of an issue because many people don't want to publicize that they've paid a ransom, and they also don't want to publicize what their weaknesses are, whether or not they failed to adequately protect the data, whether it's a city, whether it's a business, whether it's a law firm. You don't exactly go out and tell everybody, yeah, here's where we screwed up.
And you mentioned the example too of losing criminal investigative materials and evidence. Is that something that happened recently? I think you mentioned to me, was it the city of Atlanta where that happened?
Yeah, I believe that's where Atlanta, and I believe that their buses were affected as well. I'd have to double check that one, but Atlanta was hit by ransomware last year, Baltimore this year. I know something was happening in Philly earlier this week. I don't have all the details. There hasn't been a full debrief on it, but it's affecting major cities. And that's why I say it doesn't matter your size. Whether you're a small business, large business, a city, or somewhere in between, everybody is at risk at this. And sometimes it's ransomware where you have to pay to get your data. Sometimes it's more of a direct hack where somebody's trying to get data from you. But either way, you need to have adequate levels of protection. You also need to have a solid plan for recovering, because there's no way that any organization, no matter how large, no matter how well funded, is going to keep out 100% of the attacks 100% of the time. And all the hackers have to do is be successful one time, and it can be very lucrative for them.
Well, and we'll talk in a few minutes about what are some of the things that individuals and businesses can do to protect themselves from these types of hacks, from these criminal attacks. But let's continue to understand a little bit more about the nature of these attacks. We've heard about some of the big companies that have suffered data breaches, and we've our listeners will have just recently heard an episode where we talked with one of the lawyers who has filed class action cases on behalf of consumers who have suffered or are at risk of suffering a loss of their personal data, things like name, social security number, financial information, even passports in the case of a hotel, the Marriott chain that was hacked in a monstrous-sized data breach. Equifax that suffered a data breach that has affected millions of people. And it might be possible for the casual follower of these news stories to believe, well, those are just big companies that are at risk, because after all, anybody who's out there interested in hacking in the first place is probably going to target those big companies. But what I think you're telling us is it isn't just big companies that have suffered this. It isn't just big cities like Atlanta and Baltimore. It is really as well smaller businesses. And so what is the threat? What is the harm that these hacks can cause, even to a smaller business?
So 90% of businesses, small businesses, that suffer one of these types of attacks, whether they've lost all access to their data, it's going to have a meaningful impact and affect their ability to continue as a business. The cost of recovery is often more than a small business can afford. So that's if they're trying to rebuild all their systems, if it's even possible. The hackers, the ransomware makers, they've been evolving and they've been adjusting their pricing. These are smart people. Mm-hmm. They've been adjusting their pricing as of recent to allow for a higher percentage of the victims to pay the ransom. You might pay a $1,200 ransom, but you might not pay a $1.2 million ransom. And they're figuring this out, that they can't completely shut down their entire customer base, so to speak, because these are the people who need to pay them. But we have seen instances where the businesses that you would never expect that anybody would ever take malicious activity against them, a nonprofit that helps rescue dogs, why would somebody hack or hold them ransom? And a lot of times it's not intentional. They're just caught up in an infection that is spreading in the wild via email. And let's say the method of payload delivery is through terminal servers. So many people are used to remote controlling a computer in their office. They want to work remotely. They remote control their computer using some program. Windows, the popular operating system, has this feature built in. One of the most common attacks that we're seeing right now is utilizing that remote access feature that's built into Windows. Nobody is picking out, well, I won't say nobody, but most often, nobody's picking out a particular firm or business saying, we're going to hack that server. They're scanning the internet to find which firewalls have the ports open to get to those remote servers, and then they're running a script against those servers so that they can encrypt that data, and they will leave a message on the screen to a unique key, so that when the owner of that server gets around to contacting the attacker, they'll say, well, let us know the key that's on your screen, and then we'll give you the key to decrypt your data once you pay us the ransom. They weren't targeted. They just happened to have a firewall that wasn't properly locked down. They had a server that wasn't properly patched, and all these things came together, and now they're the victim of this almost like a drive-by shooting. They just happened to get caught. Now, Microsoft tries to patch these systems when they find these issues, and they'll let the public know about it, and every month on a Tuesday these updates come out. But not everybody is patching their servers on a regular basis. They don't know to check. Some small businesses think that they don't have the means to properly maintain the system, so they're just going to hope that they get lucky and these things won't happen to them. But these threats are out there. And all
or they don't want to update. You know, we all get these updates on our computers, and sometimes people are lazy and don't have time, and they don't download those updates, so they may be vulnerable if they don't do that.
Sure, you know, you have to be careful by sending the updates to go automatically, because you never know, is it going to reboot while I'm in the middle of working on a document? What else may go wrong? Is it going to introduce some other issue? Maybe they once had an incident before where they applied an update and there was some unintended consequence and the computer didn't work properly. People have many reasons for not doing it, but you have to do it. And even just over the past 2 weeks, there's a major risk out there named Blue Keep. And we had to patch around 400 servers that needed to get this update to make sure that they wouldn't suffer from this attack. Now, people might say, well, I'm behind a firewall. Nobody's going to be able to get to me. That has never stopped a hacker before. And while the hackers aren't necessarily breaching through your firewall, if somebody's laptop goes home, it's off of the network. It picks up the ransomware or whatever code while it's on the home network or at a hotel or at a Starbucks. Then they bring it back inside of their business or their firm. And now it circumvents the firewall and it's able to infect computers on the network. And this has happened before. I believe that was WannaCry and maybe Slammer years ago, where people were able to circumvent firewalls with infected laptops.
All right, so as I'm starting to sweat profusely listening to this, we mentioned ransomware. What are and earlier you'd mentioned malware. What are the differences? And give us a rundown of some of the typical or more common hacks that we're seeing, or that you're seeing.
All right, so big things that we're seeing right now. The biggest one is phishing. Is people are getting their credentials exposed to the internet. We're so used to receiving emails with links to Dropbox or Microsoft SharePoint or other file sharing services, and we know that we click on the link and it's going to prompt us for a username and password. But the attackers are playing upon our sense of ease with these big name services, and what they're doing is they're giving us links that look like they might be going to one of those services and to some document that you were expecting, but in reality it's simply a form that you're filling out, submitting your username and password for them to have access to. Now, some of these hackers will then consolidate these lists of usernames and passwords and then put them for sale on the dark web so that other people have access to your usernames and passwords. And once you're out there, you'll find that you're getting requests from everybody, whether it's more attachments or requests for information. You've been marked, that you're somebody who might fall victim to this. So phishing is what we see more often than anything right now. Something else that's very common is we call it, the porn scam email. And this is an email that you might receive that says, I know your password, and they'll even list a password of yours in the text of the email, and they'll let you know that they captured your information because you were visiting an adult website, and that they loaded malware onto your computer, accessed your web camera, recorded you side by side with the screens that you were watching, and that they've downloaded your contacts, and they're going to email videos to all of your contacts.
Oh, my Lord.
If you don't take this key and pay them a ransom, and they'll let you know the ransom is very reasonable, maybe $300-400. I think the highest I've ever seen was $1,600.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing, though. That was sent to my 75-year-old mother.
Wow.
Just random. They're buying these credentials off of the internet.
So they're faking it. But getting you to think that it's real.
On a Saturday morning, I received a text message from an attorney that I've done work with, and he just started to say, Jim, I've received this email. And I said, stop right there. Did it say this? Well, yes, it did. Delete the email. Don't tell me anything else. I don't want to know. It's a scam. Just delete the email.
Yeah.
Because something like that freaks people out.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think we've all at this point probably received an email that we recognized as being suspicious. You know, it might be from a company we do business with, a credit card company or a bank or a vendor of some kind. And I mean, I know I've seen someone, I look at it, I think, this is not even grammatical. Right. You know, so it sounds like it was written by somebody who, you know, for whom English isn't their first language, and you just delete it and you forget about it and you think you're okay.
Right.
But how big a problem is this? Because it sounds like it's so widespread now that a strategy of, well, I'll just delete any suspicious email is really only going to protect you so far.
Well, I would say, in talking about size, that the industry is big enough that I would probably make more money hacking people than protecting you from hackers, because it's a billion-dollar industry. You know, there's a lot of very smart people around the world who are using these technologies to, whether they think that it's some sort of a Robin Hood that they're stealing from the rich, or whether it's a state-sponsored group doing the hacking to collect funds to finance their government. There's so much of it out there. It's a billion-dollar industry. You know, there's ransomware or malware out there that can infect a phone so that when you call your bank, it actually hijacks the call that you were making to your bank, and you're calling their 24/7 call center instead, giving your account information as you start a conversation with somebody that you think works for your bank, but they don't. That's how complex these systems are.
Well, and God, this is just, it's staggering. So, okay, so what is the impact on a business? So far we've talked about if you click on an email that you shouldn't, or on an attachment that you shouldn't, and you receive one of these messages, one of the goals may be to essentially encrypt and therefore freeze your business's activities. You can no longer conduct business without your computer servers. But there are also those who are looking for personal information and then using that for fraudulent activity, right? I mean, that's another potential harm that a business can suffer, is the loss of their clients' personal information.
Sure, clients' information, and also damage to their reputation, because they may be seen as having weak cyber security or cyber hygiene.
Yeah.
So a very simple example of this is when an email address or when a mailbox gets hacked, and the hacker looks at the contacts of the victim and then reaches out to their contacts. We've seen organizations that have received, in this case it was a trade association, a mailbox got hacked, and then the criminal reached out to members of the trade association, letting them know that there was a new charity that the organization was supporting, and here is the GoFundMe page for this member of our organization that we would like to support in their time of need. How bad is that? So now the association has to explain to the members, no, don't click that email, no, don't spend that money. Then they also have to follow up with whether it's GoFundMe or PayPal, whoever might be hosting this campaign, unaware that it is fraudulent.
Yeah.
So at a very basic level, the theft of your identity for use for cyber fraud is a risk. At a higher level, there are concerns that data is being collected from multiple sources to build databases and profiles on individuals. So while you may not think that somebody is interested in the information, in your information, perhaps they're interested in your neighbor, perhaps they're interested in someone that you do business with. So if hackers are operating in one city, and perhaps they're downloading information from the dentist, from the doctors, from the banks, from the other businesses. They're going to build a profile on some individual based on common information that might be stored in that database, whether it's a name, whether it's a social security number, an email address, or even an address from a phone. Everywhere you sign in with your phone on someone's Wi-Fi, they're tracking information about you. Well, do you have aside from your phone number, you have a unique identifier on your phone that people are able to use as a key to see what you're doing on those networks. So all that information put together is of value to certain actors as they're trying to learn more about you.
Now, one of the other consequences, as it was explained to me when I was talking to our insurance brokers, is the loss of personal data of your clients. And this is particularly important for businesses like law firms that have clients whose information is supposed to be kept confidential, hospitals and other healthcare providers who have patient data, again, where there's a very strong obligation to protect confidentiality, where there are threats that can become present on your that can be present on your system, where the threat is not just freezing of your computer server, but also the release of all this confidential information, which would present a huge problem for a business that has that obligation to protect that data.
Oh, sure. Well, there was I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, the Panama Papers, where a law firm that was operating offshore was hacked, and the financial records of the clients of this law firm were breached. So we have seen this where law firms have been hacked to get information on their clients. Now, whether or not the hacker stumbled into it, that one I don't know. But I know that if it is known that a law firm is operating in a certain space and they have a certain type of client, that it may be attractive to a hacker. And the law firms that we work with firms that are boutique firms that you may not expect that they would have a lot of money to invest in cybersecurity, but they're working with very large organizations. These are litigation firms with very well-known clients, or the insurance law firms that we're working with, or the intellectual property law firms that we're working with. Imagine if you had the access to all the information for the patents that some major technology company is going to file this year. If you had that information before the application process, as the firm was working on those applications. There's so much, with the different types of practice areas that are out there, there's value in that data, some sort of value to a criminal actor in every type of firm.
So what do we know about who these people are? When I want to talk in a couple of minutes about those hackers, those cyber criminals who are looking for something other than personal data, financial data, and things like that. But we'll come to that in a minute. But what do we know about who these people are?
Well, there's everything from the state-sponsored actors, whether it's North Korea or China or other countries where they are conducting industrial espionage to gain secrets, whether it's for technology or financial information. There's a range. You get those to criminal organizations, down to the kid living in his mother's basement in New Jersey.
Maybe just doing it for fun.
Or maybe he's trying to get the latest pics that Taylor Swift snapped on her iPhone. Because that's another thing. There was a big deal where Jennifer Lawrence and Taylor Swift and all these other celebrities, I think Taylor Swift was in there, a lot of these celebrities, their personal pictures, which were on their phones, synchronized with the cloud, and then the hackers were able to use simple social engineering to determine what either their passwords were, or enough information that they could call and have a password reset on their cloud storage account so they could get access to whatever was backed up in the cloud from their phone. So you run a broad range. And really what's happened is the technology to enable this hacking and malware and ransomware, it's somewhat become available to everyone. If you wanted to start your own business distributing ransomware, you could go out on the dark web. You could buy the toolkits to do this. You could call another number or contact somebody else to get a list of people whose credentials are already on the dark web who have been known to pay ransoms before. So all this information is out there. So you could buy the tools with somewhat limited knowledge. You don't need to have a PhD in computer science to do this.
Yeah.
You can buy all these tools, and as long as you had the inclination and the moral flexibility to get into that type of world, you could become one of these hackers. So it's hard to say what the exact profile is. And some of these people, this is their job. You know, this isn't a hobby. This is what they do for a living.
Now, we were chatting before we started the episode, and I know your main office is in suburban Washington, D.C., and you have a lot of clients in D.C. In addition to those who are hacking for money, you know, anything from, as you said, $1,200 on up to $1.2 million or more, there are those who are engaging in these cyber attacks looking for information. And you were telling me about a situation that where this can be used to build, where gaining access to this type of data can be used to build profiles to compromise even high-placed government officials. What do you know about that?
So think about, in my case, I live in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside of D.C. Within my neighborhood, there are people that work for the Department of Justice. There are people that work, they're highly placed in the Department of Defense. There's people that work in industries, whether it's manufacturing or they're in trade associations. There's people that have access to information. And if the state-sponsored hackers are able to gather enough information on these people, they might be able to leverage this information to either obtain information from these people or potentially have them go out and do things on the behalf of that criminal organization. There's a concern here. And I'll give a great example of what happens when a hacker has too much information. I don't even know, do you have kids?
I do.
Okay, do they ride a school bus?
Yes.
Okay, if there was an email right now letting you know that the school bus was in an accident and that you needed to leave your office and come someplace, and it looked official, what would you do?
Of course, I would run right over there.
These things have happened. What if they knew the names of your kids?
Yeah.
How real would that be to you if you received an email with the name of your kid? And there are these cyber kidnappings as well.
So what are they trying to do in that example? What's the goal of the crime?
Well, in that case, they send you the email and they want you to click on a link. Okay. Click on this link to find out the status of the accident.
Yeah.
You click on that, you're not going to think twice about it. So there, you might be letting somebody into your computer.
Yeah.
So that's the way that the campaign that went out with the school bus occurred. But other things that are going on are cyber kidnappings, where people are able to make you think that they have kidnapped a loved one, whether it's that they've just called you from what appears to be a loved one's cell phone number because they're spoofing the number. What if they have pictures of the person that they hacked from the phone?
Yeah.
You would believe it. So there have been people that have been hit up for ransoms through these cyber kidnappings. And it's, again, because they know what those relationships are. They're able to connect the dots with people, who your kids are, where you live, what school to go to.
Well, and we're living in a world where the technology is so advanced. I mean, these types of crimes, I think, have existed for some time with lower tech, approaches. I mean, my wife received a call. This was a couple of years ago from her dad, and he was very upset, very worried that he had gotten a call that my wife's son had been arrested, and they needed to send money to bail him out.
Sure.
And he had gotten that call, and he was very concerned because it sounded very real. And he was elderly, and you can imagine how the elderly can be preyed upon in all kinds of scam operations. Well, we were very easily able to figure out that this was a scam because we knew exactly where my wife's son was, and we knew he wasn't being held anywhere. But her dad didn't know that,
right?
And you can imagine there's a certain number of cases where that could actually be successful. That's just using a phone.
Right.
Right. Now, here we're talking about ways where the ability to detect that something is fake, fraudulent, hacking, dangerous is so much more difficult to determine, and therefore the vulnerability is that much greater. So let me turn then to the question of what do we do about this?
Well, first let me say, you ain't seen nothing yet. Give it time. Advances in artificial intelligence. Just this week, there was an edited video of Nancy Pelosi
Right.
to indicate some behavior. And that was just video editing.
Yeah.
Now they have the ability using artificial intelligence to take a single frame of a picture and then animate the face of that individual, and with the technology to add voice to it. So there's one thing when a criminal is calling a grandparent or another elderly person making a claim about someone's in jail or been kidnapped or whatever else it may be. Wait till they can actually see the video of that person on a phone.
Saying, help me.
Saying, help me.
Yeah.
Right.
Send money.
Right. So the artificial intelligence, that's going to take these criminal activities to an entirely new level.
What about voice recording? I mean, even the most routine phone calls we get now, even leaving aside robocalls. I mean, I called a company to get a quote on something the other day, and they called me back, and of course, the first thing you hear when you answer the call is, "This call is being recorded for quality and training purposes." Mm-hmm. And I have now become paranoid enough that I say, I don't want my voice to be recorded. Mm-hmm. Stop the recording. And of course, almost always they say, well, we can't do that. And actually, yesterday had somebody actually hang up on me when I requested that my voice not be recorded. And they said, well, have a good day, sir, and click goodbye.
Yeah.
I worry about capturing my voice and how that could be used for for some criminal purpose.
Sure, there's a lot of data being captured about us everywhere we go. The surveillance cameras, it's a concern. I will say this, that I think that you're at higher risk from the emails that you receive right now and from the scans that are going on the internet seeking out unpatched computers. That's the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. But I agree that the capture of our information, of our identity, that poses a threat for us moving in the future. I agree with that. But right now, they're going to pick your pocket a lot easier than that.
So what can people do? I mean, just in my own business, periodically we'll send an email around saying, be careful. Mm-hmm. Don't click on any link or respond to any email from somebody you don't know. Mm-hmm. But of course, all of us can only be so vigilant about these things. And while some of these invitations to be attacked, may look obviously fraudulent, some of them don't. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that? We'll start with businesses, because I know your clients are primarily businesses and law firms and others. What are some things that people can do?
Engage professional help. This is the biggest thing that we see, is that a lot of firms think that they're too small, that they can't make the appropriate investments. You need professional help when it comes to managing your networks, and whoever is managing those systems needs to take a multi-layered approach to security. It used to be that if you had antivirus and a firewall, you felt that was enough.
Right.
You need antivirus, you need anti-malware, you need firewalls, you need systems that will watch the logs on your network to see where your data is going. There's a lot of very technical things like intrusion detection, detection and protection. There's all these different technologies that can help, and not all of them are right for every firm, but at least have a conversation with a professional so that you know the options of what systems are out there to help to protect your data, your systems, and your reputation. So that's the first thing that I recommend for businesses. And then there's you need to be suspicious. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate. Every time I hear my phone ring at home, I know it's a telemarketer. Anybody who really knows me is going to call me on a cell phone. So I approach the phone saying, all right, if I have to answer it, what are they going to try to pitch me on now, and hang up very quickly?
Well, that's on our cell phones too. I mean, we're hearing more and more about robocalls on cell phones.
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that you've put your name on a do not call list anymore.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever helped.
I feel like I get at least 10 calls a day. If I don't know the number, because it's not a number that I've put into my contacts, I don't even answer it. And I figure if it's someone that really needs to reach me, they'll leave me a voicemail. I can listen to the voicemail. But most of the time, these calls do not leave a voicemail, which tells me that it's a call I don't really need to take.
And sometimes they trick you by using a phone number that looks vaguely familiar.
Right.
I've seen this where I'll get a lot of numbers say, oh, that looks like somebody I know. And then, nope, it's somebody trying to pitch me on something else.
Right.
So I have downloaded an app to help to block the robocallers. In my role running a company, sometimes I think, oh, maybe it's my next law firm calling for IT support.
Right.
So I want to answer it. But you're right. More often than not, it is some type of robocaller or some kind of sales pitch.
Well, I have AT&T, and there is an app on AT&T that's sort of a telemarketer block. And I'll see that notification when the call comes in that it'll identify it as a telemarketer or a spam.
Mm-hmm.
But I promise it does not get every one.
Right.
And again, that's just my strategy. But I can tell you in the last 40 minutes that we've been talking, I feel more nervous and more vulnerable and more scared about all this than ever. So, I mean, what about insurance? So that's something that, as I mentioned at the start, got me starting to think about this. I mean, there is this thing called cyber insurance. There are ways that businesses can insure against ransom attacks and the like. I mean, is that something
correct? And
you recommend?
We do recommend that, and we carried it ourselves because of the type of business that we do.
Right.
And we have seen firms that we've been called in after they've had some type of cyber intrusion or ransomware attack where they have utilized that insurance to help to put their lives back together. But remember, you can't buy a good reputation.
Yeah.
You can get the money to rebuild the servers, to reinstall the software, but if you have a significant data breach and the word gets out that your organization was breached and that you had a leak of your client records, Panama Papers happened years ago. That's still my go-to when somebody asks me, well, what kind of risk does a law firm have?
Right.
So once something like that happens, it's out there. Yes, have insurance, but also be proactive about patching your systems, making sure that you're talking to cybersecurity professionals, perform your basic network hygiene, do all these things, and also education.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're educating your users about don't click on attachments that you weren't expecting. Hover your mouse over the email address of the sender, and
which will show you the real email.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also something else is multi-factor authentication. Now, in the email world, that's simple. When you sign into a new device, it sends you a text message or calls you, and you have to authenticate, say that you trust this device. But at a much lower level, seek authentication of requests for money. Mm-hmm. And this isn't even a technical thing.
Yeah.
Somebody sent, we see this all the time. An office manager, a controller, a firm administrator receives an email from somebody within the firm saying, please wire funds to this account. Pick up a phone and call the person that you think made that request and verify that with them. We see this one all the time in multiple industries where it would have been as simple as somebody picking up a phone or standing up from the desk, walking down the hall to say, why did you send me that request to purchase 10 Amazon gift cards? Because that's one of the common scams out there as well. So be smart, be suspicious, be cautious. There's a lot of simple things that you can do to cut down on the instances of cyber fraud, and then make the appropriate investments in the technology and talk to the right people.
What about individuals? I mean, what are the top 3 things that you would, if somebody came and said, Jim, give me the top 3 things that I should do to at least reduce my risk?
Back up. What we see, the biggest risk for individuals that we find is if their computer gets encrypted with ransomware, they're generally not in a position, or they can't justify the expense of paying the ransom to get the data back. But then they lose stuff. They lose their pictures, kid pictures, wedding pictures, vacation pictures. Make sure you have good backups, because when all else fails with cybersecurity and human judgment, and we let the hackers in and they encrypt our stuff, if we have good backups and the backups are separated from the computer itself, whether it's a cloud backup or some device that is air-gapped from the computer somewhere, make sure you have the ability to restore, because sooner or later the hackers will probably get in, so make sure you have the ability to get everything back. That's one thing. And that's true for businesses too. Just always make sure you have good backups and business continuity solutions. But be careful with your passwords. When you get these phishing emails, be smart about the emails that you receive. Some of them are very tricky and they're very convincing. But if you are not expecting an email with a link that said proposal or lease or financial documents, if you weren't expecting that, don't go clicking on that link thinking that somebody just randomly shared some information with you. Be suspicious, and when you get those emails, just delete them. And then ask for help. Whether it's my mother receiving an email trying to extract some kind of ransom from her, it was the same email that an attorney did. So all walks of life, people are going to get these emails, but as long as as everybody has somebody that they know that they can run things by and say, you know what, I got this suspicious email. What do you think about it? And whether it's watching out for your parents and letting them know, if you ever get something like that, make sure you let me take a look at it, or maybe you can just tell them to delete it.
Yeah.
It all depends on your parents, I guess.
Well, and that's something else that we talked about, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this too, and I think tonight I'm going to spend some time working on this, but we do tend to use the same passwords because I have found, I don't know how many times, I have to plug in a password and I go, oh, I don't remember my damn password. So it's, it's easier, of course, if you use a password that you're familiar with and think you're not going to forget yourself. But passwords are vulnerable, right? So, it seems like a pretty basic thing that people can do is, you mentioned authentication or double authentication, but it does seem like changing your passwords is also a pretty smart thing to do.
And having longer passwords.
Yeah.
Longer is better. So have a long password that you're not going to forget. Sometimes people will do things like the name of a song or some other phrase that they know. This is something that helps, having these passwords. And also utilize services that will offer to scan the dark web for your email address and passwords. Many of the banks are offering this for free right now for individuals. We have a service that we use for businesses where we can check for every email address within your firm, whether or not those credentials have been breached and whether or not there's a password out there. And it's generally not that your firm has been breached, that somebody's been able to extract this list of addresses and passwords. It's that people are consolidating the data. So perhaps in a business, people are using their email addresses for their LinkedIn profiles or other social networking sites or other services, and those services get hacked, and then there's a list of usernames and passwords out there on the dark web. So keeping an eye on those credentials, dark web scans is what it's called. Mm-hmm. Doing that is something that can be very helpful so that you know whether or not your password has been breached. Now, unfortunately, it's letting you know after it's out there.
That's the thing.
But sometimes it's out there and somebody hasn't taken action on it. You still want to change it even though it's after the fact. You want to have that knowledge, you want to get the password changed. And also think about, you mentioned using the same password for multiple services. Think about what other services you might have used that password on. And even if you know that the password was found associated with a breach for LinkedIn or some social media site, think about whether or not you've used that password at your bank, at the system for checking your kids' grades online, your dating service, whatever it may be. Think about all the places that you've used those passwords, and when you have that breach, change them across the board and take that as an opportunity to put unique passwords in all those services.
Now, you mentioned this, we'll wrap up with this. I know one of the big problems with what we're discussing is that once you become aware of the problem's happened, the harm's happened, your system has been frozen or your data's been released or compromised, and then you have a huge amount of work to try to recover from that. And I think we'll probably need to devote a whole episode to this with someone in law enforcement, but these are crimes, obviously, whether it's that kid in the basement of his parents' home, as you mentioned, or some state-sponsored organization that's committing these hacks. What do you know about how well law enforcement is keeping up with this?
So we have seen where the FBI was involved with fraudulent wire transfers that were requested via email, and that we have seen businesses have success in taking their money back by utilizing the FBI and also working with their bank. So it is good advice to contact the FBI if you fall victim to one of these scams, because I have seen them help with people. What I have also seen is local law enforcement, at least in the past few years, they may not be as up on technology as you might want them to be in order to help. Whether it's, we had seen somebody had a laptop get stolen, and even though they were able to remotely access the laptop after it was stolen and get screenshots of the person that stole it and the Facebook page and get the IP address, the police department wasn't prepared to go through the process of finding out where that IP address was, by contacting the internet service provider. It just didn't happen. So the person ended up losing the laptop, even though they had pictures of the person that stole it when they were accessing it.
Wow.
So I would still err on the side of contacting the authorities for a significant loss. I'm not going to call the authorities every time that I receive a suspicious email, though.
Yeah, right.
But if I did suffer monetary loss, that's something that I would do.
Well, and I've had this experience too, where I do get a suspicious email, let's say from a credit card company, and I don't click on it. I think it's suspicious. I will contact that credit card company and say, hey, I got this. And they have obviously a lot of resources to try to run these things down. But the other thing that you've mentioned is the technology is constantly changing. And so you can think that you've done what you need to do to protect yourself, but you really have to do it and do it again and do it again and keep doing it, updating whatever security measures you're putting in place for yourself as an individual or for your business, whatever it might be. It sounds like you have to really keep doing this on a regular, updated basis.
Every day that we prevent a hacker from coming into one of our clients' networks, those hackers are seeking a way to get around the barriers that we've put in place. They're well-funded in many cases. These are large, profitable criminal enterprises, so they're always doing this. And then there's also the intellectually curious that are just finding the holes in different operating systems, and they're posting them out there for companies to fix. But in the meantime, they're proving out a concept about how a hack can be perpetrated.
Yeah.
So then everybody has to go and prevent against that flaw. And this is why we patched 400 servers this week to protect from the latest, we like to call it the internet boogeyman of Blue Keep.
Yeah.
As far as I don't know that anybody's actually encountered it in the wild yet, but it's out there. And we know it, so we have to protect to get it. So you're right. Every day you need to be thinking about your security and get the professionals to make sure that your defenses are being kept up to date.
Well, it's only about 11 o'clock as we're finishing recording this episode, and I'm wondering if it's too early to pour myself a stiff drink, because I feel like my nerves are completely shot here. But I want to thank you, because obviously education is a huge part of what we all need to better understand the risks that we're facing. I mean, we can't function in the world without interacting extensively with the digital world, and every time we do, in some way, we're exposing ourselves to some of these risks. So it's obviously first order of business, it seems, to become more educated, more knowledgeable about those risks and some of the things that we can do. How can people get in touch with you, Jim, if they want more information, or if they have a business? Or obviously there are many cybersecurity companies, but if someone wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for someone to do that?
The best way is to visit our website, which is hilltopconsultants.com. You can contact us through the website and state what your question is, what your concern is, and then we'll get back to you quickly.
But don't include any suspicious attachments when you do that, please.
Yes, that'd be great.
Jim Turner from Hilltop Consultants, thank you so much for being on Good Law, Bad Law.
Thank you for having me.